Welcome everybody to this World Satsanga held on the 27th of April 2019 in conjunction with Kevin Moore and The Moore Show and More Talk. Those are the two YouTube channels that Kevin has on YouTube, of course. And welcome to this Easter. Well, I think it'll just be a week past Easter, but it'll still be Easter in Greece, because this is being transmitted from Greece. And we've got some interesting information to go through this particular month. We've got a 15-minute talk, or probably more, on how do parallel universes or event spaces affect our true energetic self and aspect, and are we divided or duplicated? And then we have some questions based upon the questions I've got in hand. I've got a lot in hand. I've even got a lot more for May as well. So I do apologise to those who want to ask questions. You can ask questions still, but those who've given me a long list of questions, I'll probably have to just cut and paste a number of questions per month, because there's so many questions I have in hand now that it's difficult to be able to do all those questions in one go, because it's not fair on others. So those of you who sent lots of questions, thank you for them. They'll be divided up over the course of the year. Thank you. And the last end of meditation would be the meditation to be successful, which I've no doubt a number of individuals will be very, very interested to do. Okay, so the first part is how do parallel universes or event spaces, and probably even realities for that perspective, affect our true energetic self. Now, if you remember, the true energetic self is also called the Godhead in Hindu texts, and in Dolores Cannon's language is called the Oversoul, and in the West we tend to call it the higher self. And the aspect, which is a smaller aspect of the sentience and energy, which is the true energetic self, is what we sometimes call the soul. But my worry about the use of the word soul is that people individualise it totally, and it's not. It's a smaller aspect of sentience and energy that's projected from and still connected to the true energetic self. And in some way the true energetic self is also still connected to the source, but it's not in the same way. Okay, so are we duplicated or divided, and how does the true energetic self cope or compensate for that? Well, from our human perspective, we don't see, unless we're very lucky and have the ability to experience multiple parallel conditions concurrently, or conflict between a number of them. And I have met a couple of individuals who have done this. They've indiscriminately moved from one version of them in one particular parallel condition or a different event space to another version, and then to another version, and it can cause lots of confusion, because unless you understand what's going on and you're able to control it, you find that you don't recognise what you've done in one particular parallel condition compared to another one. So from our incarnate human condition, it's very difficult for us to understand how our true energetic self can benefit from not only having smaller aspects of itself projected into different parts of the multiverse and or different parts of the physical universe, and experience things concurrently, and that means all at the same time, but also how does it cope with all the different parallel conditions that are created through our choice? Because from a human perspective, we can't see how this works. We don't even know. We like to assume, but we don't even know if this existence that we're experiencing right now is the mainstream existence. And so it's difficult for us to think, well, could this be a parallel condition that we're experiencing, or is it the mainstream condition? Because there is always a mainstream experience that is happening, and everything else is a fractalization from that, or a fractalization from the fractalization, or a fractalization from the fractalization from the fractalization. And so the way to understand how we potentially can see or experience the myriad different parallel functions that we can experience, we only have to look at a tree, for instance, because the main trunk of the tree, it can be classified as the main experience. The originating experience that we have when we're projected from the true energetic self into an environment that we incarnate into, or an environment that we don't need to incarnate into, for that matter. And each of the branches is a decision point that we've taken that's away from, but includes the mainstream experience. So each branch is an alternative that we've taken. For instance, if we get off a bus and we decide to turn right along a road rather than turn left, we'll experience different things. We'll experience different people on the sidewalk. We'll experience different shops. Different cars will approach us in terms of how we see those cars. They'll approach us versus approaching us from behind. So we experience different things in different ways. And in fact, we might, if we turned right, we might even meet somebody we know, versus if we turned left, we wouldn't. So the experiences can be similar or almost the same, but subtly different as well. And so as we see this tree branching out, and the branches have smaller branches, and then those smaller branches have smaller branches, we can see where the ends of the tips of the branches, maybe where the leaves are, may well be where we are currently experiencing the myriad parallel versions, albeit minor sometimes or major changes, that have accrued themselves or generated themselves through our different choices. And so we can't see which one we're in. Our true energetic self can see which particular aspect is in which particular parallel condition, but we, as the incarnate aspect, don't know whether we're in the mainstream experience or whether we're in one of the fractalized or the branched off experiences that are basically parallel universes and parallel realities, for instance, or alternative realities, if you want to call them that, which can be, of course, localized, individualized, global, galactic, or even multiversal in some experience. So we can't see that, and it's difficult for us to understand. But from the true energetic self's perspective, it sees things in a completely different way. Now, I hesitate to use the word holistic or holographic, because that's limiting in its own right. And the holographic condition is simply a three-dimensional condition which has got depth as well, which we can see into. So it's not really a good explanation in how the true energetic self can experience all of these things concurrently. And so if we think about it in a different way, it might help us. The true energetic self is a smaller, individualized function of sentient energy that is obviously being given individuality from source, and as such exists within a location within source that it's been given to work with. So that's the multiversal environment. Now, that multiversal environment is limited in its own right, of course, because it's limited to a certain amount of structure that is there for us to experience, learn and evolve with, and that structure is part of the source. The rest of the structure of the source experiences is itself. Because it's a higher level of structure, it can do it. It doesn't need to have smaller versions of itself to go into the absolute nano detail of what it is. That's what we're created for. But because it's part of this bigger structure, this bigger part of source, or should we say, it's a larger piece of sentience, so to speak. It's able to experience everything concurrently. So it can sit in the overall event space that is there and experience all the other event spaces that are within that overall event space. And so, although the overall event space from its perspective includes everything that's happening in the multiversal environment, and it can experience all of that, including all the parallel conditions that all the other true energetic selves and their projected aspects are experiencing, that is capable of doing that, and it's quite difficult, of course, from our perspective to understand that. It's more simpler for it to focus upon an event space within that overall event space that is specific to those smaller aspects of itself that have been projected into either the wider multiversal environment or specifically into the one of the frequencies within the physical universe. And so it's easier for it to experience all those different aspects. Let's say there's 5 aspects, experiencing all the parallel versions of themselves. So it's a little bit like the true energetic self is the earth underneath a forest, and the forest is that each tree of the forest is one of its aspects experiencing something. So the forest is probably the wrong way to think about it, because a forest can be hundreds of trees. But if we think about what we call a spinney, or a small group of trees, a group of 5 trees, for instance, that makes it a bit easier, because the forest will be equal to, in some minor way, the true energetic self experiencing all of the things concurrently that all the other aspects from all the other true energetic selves are experiencing when they project themselves into an incarnate condition. So if we think about those trees being 5 trees, and that the earth that the trees are in is being the true energetic self, then the true energetic self is connected to all of those 5 mainstream experiences, because it's the earth, it's there. The earth holds the trees together. And it also provides nutrients to the trees, doesn't it? The earth provides nutrients to the trees. Well, the earth, in this instance being the true energetic self, is the connection to each of those trees, because it's the projection of its own energy. And so the energy of the true energetic self is also within the aspects. Of course it is, because it's projected, but it's there, and it's experiencing the mainstream at the same time. And the smaller experiences that are off the side, these parallel conditions that come and go, that collapse back into each other once it's reached an evolutionary dead end, for example, are experienced at the same time. So if you think about nutrients or water in the earth being the sentience of the true energetic self, and those nutrients and water that are within the trunk of the trees are still connected to the soil, because that's where it's coming from, and then it goes into those branches as well. Then you can see that the essence of the sentience that is projected into each aspect is connected to the true energetic self, and is also connected still to those parallel conditions. So it's not a case of having to experience each parallel condition as a specific parallel universe in its own right. It's happening at the same time, because everything is connected to the true energetic self through the connection to that aspect which is projected into those different environments. And as the aspect has decisions to make and choices to make, the smaller versions of itself get sprung off, or equal sized versions of itself get generated. The true energetic self itself also gets pulled into that as well, and so it experiences everything concurrently. So every end of a small branch on a tree or a leaf, for instance, is experienced by the true energetic self, because in essence the nutrients or the sentience of the true energetic self is part of the mainstream experience, part of the branched off experience, parts of the branched off experience, as part of a branched off experience, etc., etc., etc. So we think of it in terms of the tree and the soil, and the nutrients in the soil, and the water in the soil. It's also within the tree, and within all the branches, and within the leaves as well. So everything is connected at the same time. And as a branch dies on a tree, so that nutrient no longer goes there. So as a parallel condition reaches its evolutionary dead end, and that branch, or that collapses back into the nearest branch of or parallel condition, because it was generated from a previous parallel condition, it goes back into the one that created it, then that sentience also moves back into it as well. So we have this condition where the true energetic self is connected all the time. So it's not divided into individual aspects, it's just diversified or fractalized. So whereas from our perspective we would be individualized, because we have difficulty in understanding the different conditions, we have an individualized condition in one parallel universe and an individualized condition in another parallel universe. From the experiential perspective, the true energetic self, which is what we really are, experiences everything concurrently, because it's all joined together. So I hope that explains how a true energetic self or an aspect experiences parallel conditions. The aspect experiences it in an individualized way, whereas the true energetic self experiences it in a collective way concurrently. And the only reason why the aspect experiences it in an individualized way is a function of its significantly lower level of sentience and associated energy. Okay, well, I hope that helps understand that particular question. It's quite a good question to ask, and is one that I can imagine will be difficult to understand even with that particular answer to the question. And I recognise that it's one particular way of understanding it, and it's not. There may be better ways, for instance, and even some of you as listeners might have a better way of understanding it, a better way to describe it as well. So if you do have them, I would be very grateful to be able to broadcast them to the rest of the listeners or the readers of the World Satsangas as we come. Thank you. Oh, and before we continue with the questions, I'd just like to thank the wonderful individual who lives in Japan, who's been correlating an index of all of the audios of the World Satsangas and all of the transcripts of the World Satsangas, and has allowed me to put them on the on the website. So thank you very much. That makes it very easy for people to find out what's available in terms of the lecture content and the question content within a particular World Satsanga, and where they can find the audios and the transcripts. Thank you for that, MO. And in respect of that, MO's questions are first in the set of questions we've got. We've got around, I think we might have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We've got about 16 questions, so plenty to go through in this hour. Excuse me for clearing my throat. So the first question from MO is relevant to the comment in the last satsanga, which is to understand that there were 7 more additional pure ohms in our source entity, and would I ask our source entity how it happened? So as I was reading it, I received the information that these pure ohm are not captive. Basically, there's a level of pure that you can be a non-captive ohm, which is pure in terms of its sentience and energy, but doesn't have its sentient weight, so to speak, to be able to move out of the energies, if you want to call it gravity, of the source entity itself. And then there's pure ohm that are non-captive, that can travel anywhere in the energy where the source entities are, within the polyomniscient sentient polyomniscient area of sentient self-awareness of the origin. That's a mouthful. And so what I'm seeing is that some of these pure ohm aren't created by source, they just come and go. They can move into a source entity's energies and move out of it. And I'm picking up that's sort of what's sort of really happened here. It's very difficult to get confused because they're within the source. It's very easy for one to think that they've been created by the source, but that's not specifically the case. I'm seeing that these are that have moved around, and they move around. They can go from one source to the other, and they can even move in other locations within this polyomniscient area of polysentience within the origin. It's a big word, that, and I'm having difficulty saying it now. It's even more difficult to write it when you're writing a book. And they can move around, basically. So they're sort of transient. They can come and go. Next question is, if source entity 13 is not exactly a source entity but a source being, that's an interesting comment, because it's sort of self-generated. Should we call it SB1? How does it recognise its big mommy, so to speak? And also, does it take more time to develop and evolve itself other than the other source entities? How does Origin feel about having a source being? That's an interesting question. The definition between a being and an entity, of course, is that an entity is created by another entity, but a being is something that has happened through the sort of natural gravitation of similar or same energies, and that natural gravitation eventually creates enough energies that gravitate together that allows it to create a level of minor intelligence, where there's an active desire to seek out similar or same energies, and eventually that creates enough energies and the attraction of bigger groups that allows that intelligence to grow and then come to self-awareness and then consciousness and then creativity, etc., and eventually sentience. And in effect, that's how the origin was created, because the origin's a being, basically, not an entity. And so when I asked the question of the origin, it says it's delighted. It's got quite a sense of humour. It said it saved me some work because this source entity 13, or this source being 1, if you want to call it that, is still, I'm being told, unsure about how it may decide to experience and learn and evolve. It knows that it's self-created and self-generated. The origins contacted it, and the origins told it about the source entities, and it's told it about its own history and the history of the source entities to date and their evolutionary cycles that they've been through, and this particular evolutionary cycle that they're in right now. And it's choosing a way to be of service. It recognises that it wouldn't be in existence unless the origin was in existence, and so it's understanding that it's only in existence because the origin is in existence, and so it's seeing that it's working out how it can be of service and how it can generate more levels of evolution and progression that allows this generation of more polyomniscient sentience and the ability to map out this current understood area that is not polyomniscient sentience, but is still understood as being there and needs to be experienced, and how it can benefit itself and how it can benefit the origin as well. So it's trying to work out how it can be of service. Okay. Next question is, I'm also wondering about the personality of SE13 or SB1. In your book Beyond the Source 1 and 2, you tell us about personalities of the other source entity. Yes, we go through how they, well, basically what they are and how they're doing things. And certainly source entities 1 to 11 had a personality, and at the end of the book 2, we find out that source entity 12 is quite a character, because it was evolving very quickly and was using event space to evolve very, very quickly as well. And it says, is source entity 13 distantly different from our known source entities, or is it too early to tell, since source entity 13 is just a baby, relatively speaking? Well, this might be detrimental to SE13 or SB1, depending upon how you want to say this. But I'm picking up it hasn't really been in existence enough to be able to create a particular personality based upon how it's experiencing things. It appears to me to be quite neutral or bland, if that makes any sense. It simply hasn't experienced enough to be able to generate its own personality yet as a function of that experience. So there's nothing as yet. And maybe, I'm being told that maybe this is something that will come out of the book that will be written fairly soon, I hope, when I finish the healing book. I'm not sure whether it's going to be the book on the Amma or the book that's going to be called Beyond the Origin. And maybe it'll be part of that. And Beyond the Origin isn't exactly Beyond the Origins, it's Beyond the Origin's current area of polyomniscient sentient self-awareness. Oh, got it right then, that's interesting, isn't it? big long words. If you try to say them, you can't say them. If you just let things happen, they get spoken properly. Yeah, I think that'll be worked on in that book, Beyond the Origin. So we'll have to wait a few years for that. Probably about 5 years, I'm being told. Okay, so the next question is, as I was translating, oh, by the way, this wonderful being Mo, who's in Japan, has been translating the history of God for us all, not just for me, into Japanese, which is wonderful. It's been translated in a number of different languages, Polish being one. I think it's also being translated into Czech, and it's been, I think also there's something in Latvian, I believe, and Chinese, definitely. I think the Chinese one's about to be published, about to be released around the Easter time. in Chinese, which is fantastic, and this is going to be in Japanese. And my understanding of the Japanese people is that when they find something this is of interest, things can go ballistic or viral. So, Mo, you might be starting a craze. Anyway, let's have a look at this question. As it was translating the history of God on page 157 to 165, which is about human diet, I got additional questions on foods. If root vegetables are best for us since they grow under the ground, how about seaweed? Is it classified as root veggies because it grows under the sea, or is it classified as leafy veggies? Oh, I am being told it's classified as leafy veggies. The sea is simply an environment. You could argue that being under the earth is an environment, but but in terms of the aspect of the seaweed or the vegetable that is being eaten, what's being eaten is not in the ground, because seaweed affixes itself to sand or rocks, for instance. But what it is mainly the leaves. It's the weed. The weed is leaves, basically, and that is in a denser environment, a denser version of air, if you want to call it that. So, whereas we exist in a lighter, in a higher frequency environment, which is air, on the Earth, then seaweed exists in a denser environment, which is water, on the Earth. And so, if we ate the leaves of a carrot, that wouldn't be the root vegetable. That would be the leaves of a carrot in the air. So that wouldn't be a root vegetable per se. That's the leaves of a plant. But the tuber of that plant being the carrot itself, or the same with beetroot being the same thing, or potatoes being the same thing, is what is inside the earth and growing. And so that's where this specific thing about root vegetables being better for us, because they absorb a lot more nutrients, and they're cleaner. They don't, although of course what comes in the leaves, of course, is also absorbed, but they don't. There's a filtering effect that's associated with tubers they don't pick up so much pollution that's airborne, for instance. Arguably, if there's waterborne pollution, the seaweed would also pick it up through its leaves. So what I'm being told here is we need to classify seaweed as being a leafy vegetable, a water-based leafy vegetable. Okay. And you could potentially argue that watercress is the same as well. That's an interesting thought process. Next question is also, I'd like to know if fermented foods are better than just cultivated from the field veggies. Does the process of fermenting increase the energies of vegetables? No. Fermenting is another way of creating alcohol, of course. And it's detrimental to the energies. It preserves them, of course. I mean, fermenting vegetables can preserve them. It's similar to smoking meats, I suppose. That preserves the meats, and so does salt. If you surround anything in salt, it preserves it, because it creates a barrier to the air, so you don't get any airborne bacteria affecting that particular food stuff. But I'm told it's not. It's best to eat them raw or just lightly cooked. So thinking in Japanese, a very good sushi chef is the best person to cook your vegetables, because sushi chefs are supposed to be able to cook things and keep it alive. A very good, an excellent sushi chef. So specifically with fish, of course. So what I would suggest is that it's okay to eat. There's no problem with it, but you don't get the same level of energies associated with the basic raw vegetable. Okay. Next and last question is, changing diet is very important for both humans and our environments, but a lot of people are having difficulties because there are many addictive foods around us. Would you ask our source entity some tips on successfully shifting our diets to healthier ones? That's a very good question. See, addictions, any addiction to something which is physical is karma. I mean, karma is an addiction to low-frequency thoughts, behaviours, actions, and those actions also include things like imbibing things or eating things, consuming things. So, and needing to consume certain types of things or imbibe certain types of things. Imbibing means, of course, drinking. So, what it's saying is that we have to, if you want to get addicted to the physical, then get addicted to the better part of the physical, which is pure. In the source is saying, get addicted to me. That's even better. And I agree with the source. Get addicted to being in connection with source or God is the best thing to be. So if you're going to be addicted to anything, get good karma and be addicted to source. It's also saying, if you think of the purity of the earth and the purity of vegetables that are better, not preserved foods, like foods that are pre-packaged and prepared and sold in supermarkets, for instance, to maintain their longevity, then you have to think of it in terms of the pure item, then unadulterated or item of food is still very close to source. So if you think of it in those terms, and if you want to be addicted to source, you can also be addicted to the pure foods. And think of it spiritually in this way, that as you eat pure foods, you raise your frequencies. And that frequency, and the raising of the frequencies, and the feeling about being purer and cleaner, and being able to experience the benefits of being a higher frequency, because different functions start to work with us. Intuition improves, connectivity with others improves, connectivity with source, our intuition improves as well. The functions of being what we are improves, and as we improve all of this stuff, we get higher and higher frequency. Our spiritual functions or metaphysical functions increase, and so we start to use those, and we spiral upwards in the frequencies all the time. So if you think of it in terms of having the best experience you can ever have, eventually through eating pure foods, those that haven't been treated with pesticides, those that haven't been preserved or pre-packaged or prepared, is the best way to think about it. You're improving your experience on earth, and you'll be entering into a way of experiencing bliss or oneness with source as a function of eating correctly. That's probably a way of doing it, and how to persuade people to eat purer foods. Another way to consider it is that if you look at things like, I use this example quite a lot actually. If you look at television that was on in the 1970s, or films or documentaries of people that were around in the 60s, or the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, not so much the 80s, but in those sort of time periods, excuse me, you'll see that the actors or the individuals that have been captured on film are thinner. They look healthier. They are healthier. They are fitter. And that's because at that point in time, we were still preparing our own food properly. We were buying vegetables from the greengrocers that weren't preserved. We were buying meat from the butcher that was sustainably slaughtered, for instance. They weren't preserved. We were buying fruit, again from the fruitier, again from the grocer. We were buying milk that wasn't preserved, wasn't sort of UHT or long life. We were buying everything that was, unpreserved, unprepacked, unprepared, and wasn't available in freezer shops, so to speak. And so, because we were creating our own food and not buying stuff that needs to be microwaved, we weren't exposing ourselves to the preservatives that are part of the packaging. And so, in essence, what we were gaining is a better and higher frequency product of food. And so, any fatty fats that were in the food wasn't sticking to us. wasn't was always able to be metabolized, and wasn't unmetabolizable, to use a long word. And so those individuals are thinner. Now we see people who don't know how to cook. They think they do, but all they do is go to supermarkets or fast food places where they buy pre-packaged things and put it in the microwave or heat it up, and it's done. and they think that they're cooking, but they're not. They're not getting fresh produce that is classified as so-called organic, for instance, or unpreserved, or without pesticides, etc. And as a result of that, what they're buying is sticking to them, and they're getting fatter and fatter and fatter. Their frequencies get lower and lower and lower. They get more and more lethargic, so they're unfit and incapable of thinking, and all they can do is exist in this very sort of zombie-like way. So really, you can see the evidence from the past and the current condition that we're in, and you can see the gap, and you can see the progression we've had from the past to where we are now, as how pre-packaged, preserved, prepared foods have affected us in terms of our frequencies, because we're getting lower than the frequencies, of course. We will be moving back up again, but that's going to be quite a hard struggle. And a lot of this going down the frequencies is based upon what we're eating as well. So if you think about wanting to reach nirvana, or wanting to reach, heaven on earth, then eat proper foods. Buy fresh foods, fresh vegetables, fresh fruit. And if you have to eat meat, small amounts of meat or small amounts of dairy, make sure it's unpreserved and it's been humanely killed. And when you receive the meats, try to avoid things like sort of bacon and pork, because they can be quite low frequency and carcinogenic as well. But things like chicken, for instance, and fish. But if you do eat the other things like beef and pork, again, with all animals, meditate and thank them for giving their life for your food. Be meaningful and thoughtful, and careful in how you take on board animal-based foods, because their personalities and the way in which they died can be transmitted in there. So ask them for forgiveness and ask them for thanks, and you will dissipate that energy, and then you should be okay in ingesting small amounts of meat as well. Okay, very good question that, and one which I hope people will be able to take on board. Next question, the next set of questions are from FN in the US. And first question is, Source 1, or Source Entity 1, said the way to get rid of karma is by everyone forgiving each other at the point of reception of the action. What is the point of reception of action? Can I kindly elaborate? It appears that Source says there is a reaction for our bad acts towards another entity. You always say that karma means attraction to low frequency thoughts, behaviours and actions, and stimulus or sensations. See also the History of God in Kindle, page 6613. The reception of an action is when somebody does something to you which is detrimental. So, for instance, if somebody pushes in front of you, for instance, in a queue to purchase something, then forgive them for pushing in front of you, because you might get angry to them, and you might say something to them, and that can cause a karmic link between you through an interchange, through a verbal interchange, and that could be a physical interchange. Also, if somebody has an accident with you in your car, for instance, although you've got to go through the process of apportioning blame for insurance purposes, you can still forgive them, because if it's their fault that they've hit you, then for whatever reason they hit you, then they hit you. Just forgive them for being unable to be in control of their vehicle at that point in time, or being focused on controlling their vehicle at that point in time. So it's about, if you can do that and forgive them as soon as you receive something or experience something, or are affected by something that somebody else has done, then you don't create this karmic link, and if you can mindfully do that at the point of the experience, then the karmic link is severed straight away, and you can go about your day knowing that you don't have to interact in some way, shape or form with that individual again in another life, or with somebody else experiencing a similar or same thing to try and negate it, if that other soul is helping you to move away from that particular karmic link. Next question. You wrote that a child gets protection from energetic attacks when it's close to its parents' energetic fields. That's the mother, yeah? What about kids who end up with no parents shortly after birth, or sent to foster care or orphanage? orphanages. Who protects them? How do these children deal with energies, and how can they be helped? Well, that's an interesting question. In essence, these children do they do suffer a bit in terms of the lack of contact or the lack of protection from being in the energy field of a mother. I mean, the mother's love projects itself from the mother, so when the child is not within the immediate energy field that is the human aura, which acts as a shield, then that projective love is also a protection as well. So the child being in the house or being close to the mother is always protected in some way, shape or form for a period of time. And this is the same thing for a guru. When a guru has a student, the guru invites that student to be close to them at their feet or at the foot of their bed when they're sleeping for a period of time to help elevate their frequencies so they can start to experience what the guru tells them they can experience when they're higher frequencies, and so they can experience temporarily what they're supposed to experience, to give them incentive and to give them encouragement and motivation to do the hard work to allow them to become higher frequency in their own right and maintain their own higher frequencies. And of course, being elevated to a higher frequency by the guru is also a bit of a springboard. And in terms of protection, this is the same for the mother. So when we have a child who is in essence orphaned at birth, for instance, then they don't get this same level of connection with the mother. They do get care from the nurses in the orphanage, for instance, or in the hospital. And so they will get some levels of protection from those wonderful beings who are being nurses. I should actually say those wonderful entities that are nurses rather than beings, because they're entities, of course. But they're those wonderful people, those wonderful souls or aspects that have decided to incarnate as nurses and look after those particular newborn or newly incarnate souls. So they do get some protection because there's a natural need to love them. The nurses will be sort of generating care, concern, and pity, and a desire for that child to have a better life and to find somebody who can look after them. Now, in the event that the child as a baby is adopted early, then the mother who adopts that child will protect that child with their love, because they, for whatever reason, if they can't have children themselves, or they desire to have children that need a mother that don't have a natural mother, in preference to having their own children, for instance, or maybe they have they foster them for some time, or maybe they desire to have a mixture of their own children and help other children who don't have a family to progress as part of their own being of service to others. Irrespective of how that happens, they will get protection from that particular individual who is fostering them or has adopted them. So, but there will still be a gap there, and that gap will be filled in some small way by the love generated by the nurses. So there's sort of transient protection there given to them, and of course they, depending upon how they are, they can start to generate their own protection, or they don't. And if they don't, you can see that they start to have psychological issues at times, other than being a higher frequency, and the communicative bandwidth that they are on being not being picked up by parents who are a lower frequency, for instance, creating confusion, concern, and frustration as a function of being a higher frequency is something different. So those children who are in and out of being protected will start to either generate their own protection naturally, or by using their aura subconsciously, or they will generate these sort of psychological issues associated with being bombarded by all the random thoughts and the energies that people project at random times or in aggression. So they will have a difficult time, and the difficulty of that time is a function of how much protection they get on the various different transient bases, but through being nursed or being adopted or being fostered. Okay. Right, next question is quite an interesting one. Name some of the successful inventors of sacred geometry devices and the devices and what they do. Wow. I'm going to have to turn off the recording for this so I can meditate a moment. Well, I did a little bit of meditation, and to be honest, the individuals are far and few between. There is one gentleman, and I can't remember his name. There's a video of him, but I can't even access the video on Google or anything. But I was given that I was shown it by my late father-in-law, Dennis Milner, and this gentleman had created some different types of geometry that created weather conditions, and it could generate by compressing the etheric energies within the earth to create clouds and therefore rain. And I just can't remember his name, unfortunately. Maybe if I think about it, I will add it onto the transcription later. But the other person was Tesla. Tesla was very good with sacred geometry. A lot of his work was based upon understanding that, and unfortunately not much of that is understood about him. But certainly when you look at some of the energy or the electricity generating or broadcasting devices that he created, and you can understand that some of the geometry was based upon the sphere. Also Marconi, I am told, worked upon some forms of geometry based upon cones and the reception of energy as a result of that as well. I'm just thinking, just logging in, see if I can see anybody else there. I'm being told that Edison touched it but didn't pursue it. Those are the sort of inventors, I mean, predominantly Tesla and Marconi. There was a Russian person as well, but I can't think of the name of the Russian person. No. The Russian person, I'm told, was employed to create a radar or a radio blocking signal, and fortunately, unfortunately, the technology and the construction that was created to do this is still around, and isn't used. But I'm told that when it was being used, it was surrounded by fog. So when it was actually working, it was creating its own weather system around it. So those, and again, I can't remember that I don't know that gentleman's name, but Marconi was one. Edison touched it, and Tesla was another person we know about. And there's this gentleman who's got plenty of videos of creating and generating weather systems in places that were arid and needed to have rain. Okay, let's have a look at the rest of the questions. So sorry if I haven't satisfied that particular question well. Okay. Next question is, in my book I identify 3 religions and the people who brought it. So Jesus, this will be the history of God. So Jesus, Muhammad, and the Buddha. I don't mention Moses and Judaism. Why is that? I'm being told it wasn't significant. In terms of a belief system, it wasn't based upon helping individuals understand the truth of who and what we are, and how to contact who and what we are in the same way. That the originating the religions that were generated from the original teachings of Jesus, Muhammad and Buddha gave. And that's the only reason. It was a bit loose, and it became very, what I'm being told, it became changed by mankind very quickly. I mean, so did Christianity, of course, and Buddhism, exactly, and Islam. But the essence of what it was originally wasn't as strong as the others, and so these are the more dominant ones. For the reader, there is a book I'm going to do at some point, which looks at religions and their origin points, and also looks at the commonalities with my work, where they are, to help illustrate the sort of the psycho-spiritual aspects of them, and the spiritual physics surrounding them, and the ability to use them as a means or a modality to allow us to become self-aware and self-realised, or in connection or communicative, robust communicative conditions with our source or with our true energetic self. So I will address all of these different religions as much as I can do in that particular book to see where they are. So we'll see in some detail how, for instance, Judaism has what impact it had, but it didn't have the same impact as the others. Some people would argue otherwise, and of course it will have had an impact from the perspective of the human being, but in terms of the impact of the human being and being able to communicate with themselves, their higher selves and source, it's a different thing altogether. So next question. So much is attached to Judaism, religious books and hidden meanings to our creation. There are so many books or movies as to I am that I am, when Moses received the response from God, and so many interpretations of what is the proper format for using that phrase. What is my take on that? If we use this interpretation as being, if we say I am that I am, or I think therefore I am, is another way of thinking it, is basically a very, this is why I didn't focus on it. It's loose. The meanings, although there's some hidden meanings there, aren't focused enough, basically. The problem with religious books, and all religious books, including the Bible, interestingly enough, Bible is a Greek word, vivli, or viblio, which means book, so it's the book. Even the Bible was written 300 years or so after the time of Christ, and therefore has a number of different errors and personal desires of the author constructed within it. And if you think about, we can't remember what we did a week ago, let alone a month ago, let alone 2 days ago, with any accuracy. Then how can we translate what happened 300 years ago in any real and robust way, even though there may have been texts created by the apostles? So it's difficult to get to understand how books can really be as accurate as possible in this particular instance, when they're trying to portray something which is, untranscribable at that particular time. But the interpretation is basically a low education way of trying to say that I am what I am. I am God. We're all God. We're all individualized, smaller individualized aspects of God. And I feel it was trying to explain that. And because of the educational levels and the ability to understand things, because of the individuals being significantly lower in their expansivity in those particular times, illustrates that the way in which things had to be described wasn't accurate enough or focused enough to be able to stand the test of time and be meaningful, and also even to be able to broadcast accurately that information between one generation to another generation. So really the proper format would be that I am God, and you are God, and or you are Source, and we are Source. We're all smaller individualized units of Source. And even now, that is difficult for people to consume or understand, and it's even now that is a really poor way of describing it. So although it makes sense to us now with our levels of education and expansivity, in another progressive state or another time, that's going to be a poor descriptor as well. So I hope that sort of answers that question. So it's all to do with describing the I am or I am being. I am energy. I think if that makes any sense. I am sentience. But how do you describe sentience to somebody who didn't understand the word sentience in the past? So I am. Simply I am means I exist, and that's what it is. I exist. I am that I am. I exist and I am everywhere. So there's a lot more to it than meets the eye here, but it's a way of describing that sentience exists and it's not contained within a physical form. That's another way of saying it as well. Okay. Next question. What does downstream action mean? Well, anything that's downstream is anything that is in the future, so to speak. So anything that is created. So if we turn on the tap in our kitchen, our water tap in our kitchen, the downstream function of that is water's released from the tap and fills the sink. That's the downstream action. Okay, the action of opening the tap is the current action. The downstream action of that is the water comes out of the tap and fills the sink. The upstream action would be the thought to open the tap. So anything that's before is upstream, anything that's after is downstream. Okay, it's a logical progression in timing plans. For those of you who do timing plans, that an upstream function is what came before the point in time that we're at now, and the downstream function is what has to happen afterwards. So the upstream functions are what created the point in time we are now, and the downstream functions are that which are created from this point in time, and the things that are happening to create those other things that happen. Okay, next question. Regarding walk-ins, you said it's difficult to walk into the mature incarnate for those who are already established and agreed incarnate existence. Please clarify what this means. Right, I'll rephrase it. It's difficult to walk into the mature incarnate vehicle because there's already souls within that vehicle who have grown up with, or that have established their connectivity and their immersion with that connectivity as a function of time or clock time, so to speak. So there has to be an agreement with the incumbent soul or aspect to allow another soul or aspect to share that vehicle, that body, for a period of time and then depart. It's also very difficult if there was no desire to have a walk-in. For instance, if there was a desire for a certain human vehicle or body to be used by one particular soul or aspect, and then at a certain point in its existence that soul or aspect would move out and another soul or aspect would come in and animate it, then that's fine because that's part of a plan. But when a particular aspect is with that body, or the soul is within the body, and it has no plan, or there was no plan previously created for another soul to come into that body, then it can't. It can't even force its way in because of the connection that's there. And there's also the guides and helpers that are there to sort of help protect it, of course. And of course the Trimenedetic self would also have a thing to say or a means of protecting it. So if there's no plan there or no agreement between souls to occupy a similar or same body at the same time, either from birth or further on down the existence of that body, then it can't. Then a soul can't walk in. There are times, however, when this is possible because of the way that the existing incumbent soul treats the body. For instance, if that soul decides to take drugs or decides to drink so much alcohol that they become paralytic, then the physical body becomes a different frequency, an abhorrent frequency, and then the soul has to get out. And when that happens, the natural protection of the aura breaks away, and so a crack appears and an opening appears, and the soul has to get out of the energies of the body because it is too abhorrent. The energies created by taking drugs create this significant disharmony, and that's the same when you drink so much alcohol that you pass out. So in that instance, it is possible, because the soul vacates the body temporarily until the energies become more harmonious again, when the effects of the drugs wears off, or the effects of the alcohol wears off, then another soul could move into that body. But that's only a temporary basis. You can't do that forever, because when the effects of the alcohol or the drugs wear off, and the body starts to become more harmonized, then the soul can come back into it, and that other soul has to get out, because it's not aligned to that body. When the body becomes more harmonized, it starts to realign itself with the dominant soul, or the primary soul, or the soul that is assigned to it, and not the soul that's walked in temporarily. And so it gets squeezed out. It can't stay there. It's like oil and water. It has to move out. Okay, so that's why it's difficult. So the next question is: some say Obama has walk-ins in order to become the president and later acts as the president. Is that correct? Did he have walk-ins, and how many? Who were they, and why did he have walk-ins? My understanding is he didn't have walk-ins, but that body was born with 4 souls attached to it, and each of those souls were allowed to function collectively as one. So you had a personality that would change slightly when the skill set of one of those souls had to come into play to allow Obama to do the work he did when he was president, for instance. And even when he's providing an influential service to others as a function of the work that he's doing now outside of being president. So this is quite common. Individuals, or should we say individual bodies that end up being in a leadership position that is affecting a significant number of individuals on a worldwide basis, generally don't have souls in them that are capable of having all of the skill sets required to do that job. So there are usually more than one soul incarnate and incumbent within the body that operate either collectively or in rotation, or as and when a particular skill set is required to be able to function in the environment that they need to function within, and with the plethora of skills that they need to invoke to be able to do the role that they're doing. And that's quite common, this is. Okay. So next question is, you wrote, and an aspect that is well connected, one that has a higher level of frequential state, even when projected into lower frequencies, can access this information from the tests. This is how mediums see the future. They can see another event space. Could we be of a higher level of frequential state as an entity, even when projected into the Earth, into this low frequency condition? Yes, an aspect that's well connected has a higher bandwidth, so to speak, and therefore is able to connect more readily with the true energetic self, and with source, of course, and the information within the environment that is the multiversal environment, and specifically pinpoint that information that's available to us from the physical environment that we call the physical universe. So, so the bandwidth is increased within those individuals, and some are born that way because they have roles to do. That bandwidth would normally be increased as a result of the number of souls, but in most instances, those souls who've got those bodies that have got multiple souls in them are usually immersed within the incarnation, so that they don't get the level of sort of high function or high functioning ability to communicate with the true energetic self and source whilst they're incarnate, because they have a different function to do and they need to be immersed in that. But we can, through work on ourselves, meditation, doing high frequency service to other individuals, eating the right foods, thinking the right thoughts, being of service, having high frequency thoughts, behaviours and actions, can raise our frequencies to the point where we increase our connectivity. If we start on working with those functions that are part of that increased frequency of connectivity, we start to trust them rather than human logic, and as a result we gain higher frequency, and that opens up other functions and other abilities, and we start to work with those, which again increases our frequency and opens up other functions, and this increases our bandwidth as a result of it. And so if we can work on ourselves in a way which is higher frequency, spiritual, for instance, not just spiritual, and then using spirituality as a way of helping us benefit over others, but helping others when they require it, and helping ourselves by meditating and connecting to Source and providing some level of service to others that is sometimes passive, then we will increase our frequencies and we will be able to communicate with our Source, and that will increase our bandwidth by default. But it's a constant struggle. We have to make sure that we don't invoke any potential egoic conditions by feeling that we are better than somebody else because we're more connected, because that also creates a downward spiral. Okay, and the next and last question is, once disincarnated, we are moving to transfer our experience to the TESS. What are mediums really accessing? I.e., when Bob died, there is no more Bob. Is the medium accessing the true energetic self of Bob, or a programming representing Bob or Bob's guide put this facade of Bob on for the benefit of the incarnate being here? Right, I'll rephrase that. When an aspect or soul is disincarnate and enters back into communion with the true energetic self, when a medium connects with that aspect, are they connecting with the personality that's created in that particular incarnation? The answer is depends upon the individual medium. If they have been given a personality trait by a client who that newly disincarnate individual is wanting to communicate with through the medium, then they will. That's like an energetic signature. Okay, the energetic signature that is that aspect, even in the most diffuse form of communing with their true energetic self, can act as a link with that sentience that was projected into the body that was Bob, for instance, in this particular example. So if we think about the fact that this particular aspect may have experienced thousands of lives in different eras of Earth and different eras and locations and frequencies within the physical universe, then we'll see that there are many different potential personalities that have been created that create the overall personality or energetic signature of that particular aspect in its individualized state or in its communal state within the true energetic self. So if the medium, in its knowledge of the personality of that individual from the human perspective, uses that as a key or a link to be able to communicate with that particular aspect of sentience within the true energetic self, then it will work. It'll be able to communicate with it. Now, because it's communicating with it using that particular energetic signature that's created as a result of that recent human incarnation, it doesn't stop it from accessing all the other information that particular aspect has accrued through other incarnations, and it also doesn't stop it accessing other information from other aspects that particular true energetic self has projected, and the experiences that they've had in different incarnations or lives or projections. And it also doesn't stop it from experiencing the experiences that the true energetic self itself has experienced in its own right. So think of it in terms of a link, of tuning into a certain frequency or channel that allows you to communicate with a smaller aspect of that true energetic self, and also a smaller aspect of that aspect. So because the life that was Bob in this instance is only a small aspect of the overall personality of the sentience that was Bob, which is also a smaller aspect of the sentience of the true energetic self. So it's like a telephone number. Okay, there's a whole worldwide system of telephone numbers, which gives us access to certain individuals, to one particular aspect for example. Or better still, think of it in terms of that telephone number is your connection to the internet. Okay, so you have access to the internet through that one telephone number, the modem, for instance, the Wi-Fi. That is the connection to that particular aspect of sentience that has been, and the personality that was created temporarily in this particular incarnation. That's the connection. Then you have access to all the internet, don't you? So that's the same thing with this particular aspect. Bob, the soul that was Bob, gives you access to the Trianetic Self in totality. The phone number that you're using as part of your connectivity to the internet gives you access to everything on the internet. But with all these things, you need to know how to ask the questions and where to go, so to speak. So it's so basically it's not a facade that the Trianetic Self creates. It's an access point that can be used by recognizing the energetic signature created by that personality that's created by the incarnate aspect within the soul, within the body that was Bob. Well, a very convoluted answer, and thank you for that answer in totality. Lots of answers there, and hopefully lots of questions. Okay, we're at 1 hour and 10 minutes, so we're being fairly efficient in the way we're doing things now. So we need to do the last part, which is the end of meet meditation, which is a meditation to be successful. Okay, so let's calm ourselves down, sit in a straight backed chair with our back straight, feet flat on the ground, palms uppermost on the upper thighs, closed eyes gently focused on the location of the origin of the third eye, which is in between the two eyebrows and above the bridge of the nose. And I want you to just visualize, or you can use a mentally spoken word to achieve the same thing. By mentally spoken word, I mean just speak in your mind's voice in a way which describes what you want to achieve. So, for instance, if you visualize being in a room, you can describe the room that you're in. You can say, I am in the bathroom, or I am in the living room, or I am in the kitchen. Okay, you can say that, and that will generate the same energies supporting what you're trying to achieve vocally, mentally vocally, rather than mentally visually. So clairaudiently rather than clairvoyantly. So in this instance, I want you to visualize being in a cinema, and you've got the best seat in the cinema. In this cinema, the best seat is only one seat. It's your seat. Now I want you to visualize the screen becoming active. And I want you to see something that you need to be successful in or want to be successful in. It could be successful financially, it can be successful physically, doing, for instance, a marathon or a long distance cycle ride, or taking a driving test, or taking an academic examination. Or it can be experiencing financial affluence, abundance in any way, shape or form, material wealth, or health. So see yourself in that condition. See on the screen, see an image of yourself experiencing financial affluence, being rich financially, or being rich in material wealth in terms of a very nice house or a very nice car or a very nice garden, or see your role being a very nice job, you know, whether you want to be a doctor or a nurse or an engineer or an accountant or an office worker, a clerk or a shop owner, or have your own business. See on this screen that which you want to be or experience as being where you are now. Remember, everything exists concurrently. Everything, although it can be identified in separate event spaces, exists within the same event space. And all you need to do is to focus on what you want to experience to create this event space that's in a different parallel condition and evoke it in this condition. So for example, if you're having an illness and you want to become well and fit and healthy, visualize yourself on this cinema screen. See an image of you now or in the future doing the things that you can't do now because of this whatever illness you have or disability you have. See yourself in this state of affluence. See yourself being successful in job applications. See yourself answering all the right questions in an exam. This screen is a cinema showing you what you want to be and the level of success that you want to experience. Invoke this screen every morning as you wake up. Don't just see it though, know it and be it. Don't believe it, know it's happening. And know that you can work to make it happening. Now that you have the end point, the end experience of success, see where you are now. And then see the steps, the logical steps that you can easily achieve. So make them achievable steps that you need to make to get to that point of success, whether it's a successful self-healing, a successful examination result, a successful business contract, a successful job application and interview, a successful house purchase, a successful product purchase, a successful relationship. See the things that you need to do in logical, sequential steps, one by one, achievable steps that allow you to get to where you are. Where you want to be. Put this state of success that you visualize on this cinema screen in front of you as a point in the future that you know you can make it. Show these, and then show this on the cinema screen, a film, a movie of you achieving the steps, working on these steps, achieving the steps, moving on to the next step, achieving the next step, moving on to the next step, achieving the next step. See yourself being success. Use this one particular example that you're working on right now as a key to overall success. Once you've achieved success in this particular way, with this particular desire, you know the process. You can use this process to work on the rest of the ways in which you want to be successful. So if you've achieved success in a certain examination and you've seen yourself do it and how you're doing it, use the same process to get yourself that job that you want, that house you want to buy, the house you want to sell, the car you want to sell, the car you want to buy, the salary that you want. Use the cinema screen to show you the processes that you're going to go through. Plan the processes. See them happen on the cinema as a film or a movie, getting towards the end goal that you're going to see first, of you having this wonderful partnership, this wonderful house, this wonderful life, the healed condition that you want, the role or position or job or level of status that you want. And know that you can use this process to recreate any level of success that you want. Use the cinema, project on the screen, see yourself in the level of success that you want to experience, and then go backwards from that point to this position now, and then show or plan logical steps that get you from here to that point in success, and make those steps not only just logical or sequential, some of them may be parallel, but make those steps easily achievable. And by easily achievable, that doesn't mean they're going to be, super easy or just given to you on a plate. I mean that you might have to stretch yourself a little bit and work for it, but it's well within your capacity. And as you achieve each step, you grow, you expand, your ability gets bigger, your confidence rises, the steps come to you faster. Your ability to work out how to get to the next step becomes more coherent and focused. And so you achieve your level of success in a clear, concise, repeatable and robust way, and you can use the same process again and again with different levels of success that you wish. Again, see the end point right now in whichever modality of success that you wish to experience. Know that it's happening. Not that it's going to happen, it's happening. The logical steps that you create are part of the happening process of being successful in the way that you want to be successful. Know that any little hiccups are simply bumps in the road. They don't stop you, they make you grow. They give you more experience and allow you to evolve, making you more competent in achieving the next step. Okay. Work on this process every day when you want to experience success. So let's bring ourselves back into the room. So slowly come back to your body, having been in your cinema. You're now sitting in the room where you're listening to this satsanga and working with this meditation. Slowly come back into the room, slowly open your eyes, and if you have any liquid water, is best, of course, mineral water's good, and take it to help ground you. And again, if you want to be successful, visualize it every day. Know it's happening. Not that it's going to happen, or it may happen, or should happen, or could happen, or might happen, but it is happening. Not that it will happen, but it's happening. Everything you do is success. Every step you make is success. Everything you're doing is success. Okay, well, thank you very much for listening to this particular satsanga, and it's always an honour and a pleasure to be able to answer the questions that people give me. Lots of questions, of course, always lots of questions, and please do send them in. And those people who've sent in lots of questions, I'll have to split them up into parcels of 5 or 6 or 12, or 12 being an interesting number, of course. But I will always answer those other questions that come in on a monthly situation, to slot in between those questions I've got that are going to be more long term in terms of their being answered. Okay, well, the next satsanga is going to see me in Japan. I'm going to Japan not to work on spiritual work, although it's sort of spiritual work, because I'm going to Japan to practice Aikido in the all-Japanese Aikido demonstrations in the Budokan. So I'm part of that. It's only a small part. It's a collective part with the organisation I work with, and a demonstration usually is about 2 minutes, so it's not a long piece of fame. But also I got the chance of meeting a few people over there who are wonderful people who help me out in lots of different ways. Not only with Aikido, but also with their own spiritual work as well. And there's one particular individual I'm going to meet who's also works with Dolores Cannon, worked with Dolores Cannon. So I shall be in Tokyo for the time of the next satsanga, albeit transiently. Okay, so God's love to you all, Source's love to you all. Know and remember that you are all one with the Source, and it's a wonderful thing to be able to work with you in this way. And so the next satsanga is going to be in May, of course. I'm just going to look at the weekend. It's probably going to be the 26th. I'm just having a quick look at the presentation date. It's going to be the 25th, actually. Okay, it'll be presented on the 25th. Okay, 25th of May. So thank you very much to everybody, and thank you for Kevin for broadcasting and working with me. Sometimes it takes a bit, sometimes he's a month behind because of his own work. He's very busy, as we all are, but I do thank him anyway for the work he's doing in the way he's doing it, and that's taking the time when he can to broadcast these satsangas, and with the wonderful graphics he sends them with as well. So namaste to you all, blessings to you all, and have a wonderful rest of the day.